joining us now for reaction to today's jobs report. We've got Jason Greer, founder and president of Greer Consulting. Jason, thank you so much for joining us on a holiday-shortened week. I know. Listen, I know you could be off kicking your feet up next to a pool or the beach right now. Let's talk about this jobs report coming in better than expected. The economy growing by 147,000 jobs in June, according to the Labor Department. The unemployment rate 4.1%. Both of those headline numbers better than expected. I want to get your reaction to that, and then we'll dive deeper into a little bit under the hood.
Well, I hate to say this about ADP, but you had ADP just, 24 hours ago talking about we're going to lose 33,000 jobs. And we're sort of seeing ADP, with all due respect to them, they're about as consistent as the New York Knicks at this point, right? Because you look at the fact that they actually gained, and we actually had 147,000 jobs that were added to the economy. This was even better than we could have predicted.
Okay, so when you think about the growth, though, you also have under the hood, it is better than expected, but you do have 4.5 million who are working part-time for economic reasons. So what does that suggest when it comes to, just how employees are faring in the current climate?
Well, employees are scared. Even though you have a record number of jobs, you still have employees. Look, I talk to employees all the time, and here's what they say. They go, we don't even know what July is going to look like. We don't know what August is going to look like, and so on and so on. The biggest fear for so many employees as a result of layoffs that happened in the past, as well as some of the economic uncertainty, is we just don't know what these tax cuts are going to mean. We don't know if our employer all of a sudden is going to decide that the whole tariff conversation is too robust and we have to pull back. Therefore, we're going to get laid off. Employees are scared.
So employees are scared. When you think, though, about overall payroll growth, it is strong. But again, so many are underemployed. So how meaningful is it when you kind of take it all into context?
It's meaningful in terms of it being a victory for President Trump, but it's also one of those things that you need to be careful, because when we're looking at growth, but we're really only looking at growth in two industries, leisure and healthcare. And so when you look at the fact that those industries are growing, whereas when you look at manufacturing, you have a lot of manufacturers who are legitimately coming out and saying that this market right now is hellish. They can't really borrow because they don't know what's going to happen with the tariffs. And at the same time, they're really contracting in terms of the number of employees that they're hiring. So I think it's one of those things that, yes, it is a victory lap today. We need to be mindful that we're not taking it too far.
Okay, so that we're not taking it too far. You talked about healthcare, that adding. Leisure, as you point out, has shown strength. Government employment in this most recent one, you did see an increase overall, but it's choppy depending on where in government. And then, there are still some who are on, for instance, paid leave, receiving severance, that are still counted as employed in the establishment survey. So over time, we may see that number kind of shift. When you think about those dynamics, what does that shift tell you about public versus private sector? And I want to just add this layer to it. Private payrolls coming in, an increase of 74,000. It's good that we see an increase, but that number was weaker than expected. And again, there is some divergence from ADP, but does this tell you that there's a challenge under the surface, or, is that making too much of it?
Let's say the biggest thing when you look at on the public sector, I mean, you consider that over 400,000 people were laid off in January. And as a result of court cases, as a result of a variety of other things, you see some of those employees that are being brought back, but we still don't know if those employees that have been brought back are going to be brought back permanently. So that market on the public side is still in fluctuation. You have state and local governments that are still hiring at a good clip. I think on the other side, what we're seeing with private employers is private employers are just not hiring at the rate that they did before, even though they're posting a record number. We need to be careful with this. Private employers are posting a record number of job ads, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're exactly hiring at the same time. Because what we're finding is that they're posting a lot of these because they want to show that they are growth, that they're growing to their shareholders, especially if they're a case of they're looking to be acquired or they're looking to acquire somebody. So we just need to be mindful that those numbers are still good, but there's some truth underneath the numbers that we really need to look at.
And then I want to go back to a point you made earlier. You talked about borrowing. You talked about it as it relates to, just a kind of more of the lack of clarity around tariffs, which hopefully we'll get some certainty around that soon, especially given the July 9th deadline. But what about the Fed? Where do you think this leaves the Fed, this latest jobs report?
At least the Fed exactly where they've been. I mean, you have Jerome Powell that just said the other day that we have to look at the labor market. We have to look at, the overall growth of the economy. And I know that President Trump recently came out and said that Jerome Powell needs to resign, but he's still a victim of his own success because Jerome Powell's sitting back saying, "You want me to cut the rates, but why would I cut the rates when there's nothing in the market to justify that cut other than the fact that you want it?"
Okay. Anything else that stands out to you about the job market as you reflect on either these numbers or the patterns that you've been paying attention to?
Yeah, I'm really glad that you brought up earlier about the fact that you have people who are working a lot of part-time jobs just to really make ends meet. Because one of the things that people are really not talking about is the fact that unemployment rose for teenagers to about 13.4%. And we're talking about that during the summer. Understand, you have teenagers who, historically would go out and work at McDonald's, Wendy's, whatever the case might be, and they can't get jobs. They can't get jobs because they actually have adults that are working those jobs and companies are not releasing them. But you have adults 40, 50, 60, 70 years old who are working these part-time jobs just to pay their mortgages. So I think that speaks to the fact that even though the economy is relatively strong, we're seeing some underlying currents of people who are really struggling within this economy.
So is it just, I just want to get a quick final thought. Are you noticing in terms of your work, because I know you work with a lot of large companies and you work with employees as well, are you seeing this divergence between, say, the upper tier and, say, lower tier, when you think about, by lower tier, I mean economics and income levels and having to, kind of this divergence between the haves and have-nots?
Oh, big time, big time. When I talk to my executive clients, even though they're concerned about the market in terms of their own job viability, at the same time, they're making more money than they ever have. But on the other side, when you talk about your line level employees, those are the folks who are making 2 to 3 jobs, or working 2 to 3 jobs just to make ends meet. So I had an employee say this to me just 3 days ago. He goes, "Look, I know everybody talks about how good the economy is, but I'm not feeling it. I'm not experiencing it. We're living off credit cards and, the credit card debt, even if you look at the numbers, people living off credit cards has gone through the roof. So that's why it's really a tale of two cities when we look at this economy. Do we have a record number of jobs that were added? Absolutely. But do we have a record number of people who are living just barely above water? Absolutely.
All right, Jason, great context. Thank you so much for your reaction and insight. That's Jason Greer, founder and president, Greer Consulting. Jason, have a great weekend and a great holiday.